Kim Tae-ho pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors of Nexus Station at 3 in the morning when most beings were asleep. The wheels squeaked softly against the metal floor as he made his way toward Section 7 where the big ships docked. He had been working this job for 5 years now and knew every corner of the massive space station that served as the galaxy's busiest port. Most people never noticed him. To the alien traders and human merchants, he was just another worker in a gray uniform who cleaned up their messes. The tall blue Zentari beings stepped around him without looking down. The floating jellyfish creatures from the nebula systems drifted past as if he was invisible. Even his fellow humans barely said hello when they passed him in the hallways. Tae-ho did not mind being ignored. He actually preferred it this way. When people paid attention to him, they usually wanted something, or were angry about something he had done wrong. It was easier to just do his work and go home to his small apartment where he lived alone with his collection of old Earth movies and instant noodles. Tonight felt different, though. The station buzzed with nervous energy that made his skin crawl. Earlier that day, the biggest salvage operation in galactic history had brought something to Nexus Station that had everyone talking in whispers. Even the cleaning staff, who normally gossiped about everything, had gone quiet when the subject came up. The Void Razor had arrived. Tae-ho had heard stories about this ship for months. It was a massive black warship that had appeared 3 years ago in the Outer Rim territories. Nobody knew where it came from or who built it. What everyone knew was that it had single-handedly destroyed the entire Kepler defense fleet in less than an hour. Then it had burned 6 colonial worlds before vanishing into dark space. Military experts called it impossible. The ship was over 2 kilometers long and moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. Its weapons could punch holes through planetary shields, and its armor could take direct hits from antimatter missiles without showing damage. Worst of all, nobody could figure out how to communicate with it, or who was piloting it. Then 2 weeks ago, a patrol found it floating dead in space near the Vega system. No energy readings, no life signs, no response to any signals. The salvage crews who towed it back reported that when they got inside, they found something even more disturbing than an active weapon of mass destruction. They found nothing at all. The ship was completely empty. No crew quarters, no command bridge, no pilot seats. Just endless corridors filled with strange, organic-looking technology that pulsed with faint bioluminescent light. The walls seemed to be made of some kind of living metal that was warm to the touch and occasionally shifted slightly when nobody was watching. Now the Void Razor sat in Docking Bay 7, waiting for someone smart enough to figure out its secrets. The Galactic Council had sent their best xenorchaeologists. The Human Space Navy had brought their top engineers. Even the mysterious Void Touched, who claimed to understand technologies from dead civilizations, had come to examine the ship. None of them had made any progress. The ship remained as silent and mysterious as when it first arrived. The bio-neural core that seemed to serve as its brain showed no activity. The living metal hull stayed cold and unresponsive. After 2 weeks of tests and scans and attempts at communication, the experts were starting to think the ship might be permanently dead. Tae-ho reached Docking Bay 7 and stopped his cart outside the security checkpoint. Usually he would need special permission to clean near such an important discovery, but tonight the guards were gone. The whole area was eerily quiet after 2 weeks of constant activity. He figured the scientists had finally given up for the night and gone to get some sleep. He pushed his cart through the checkpoint and into the massive docking bay. What he saw took his breath away. The Void Razor was enormous, even bigger than he had imagined. It filled almost the entire bay like a sleeping giant made of black metal and shadow. Strange curves and angles covered its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Faint purple lights pulsed slowly along its hull like a heartbeat. The ship was beautiful in a terrifying way. It looked organic, almost alive, despite being clearly artificial. The metal surface rippled slightly in the dim light as if it was breathing. Tae-ho found himself walking toward it without really meaning to. His feet carried him across the bay floor until he stood directly beneath the massive hull. Up close, the ship looked even more impossible. The surface was covered in intricate designs that seemed to shift when he was not looking directly at them. He could hear a very faint humming sound like something singing in a language he could not understand. The air around the ship felt charged with electricity that made the hair on. His arm stand up. Te-ho reached out without thinking. His hand moved toward the hull as if pulled by an invisible force. He knew he should not touch it. The scientists had put up warning signs everywhere. The military had classified the ship as extremely dangerous. But something deep inside him whispered that it was safe, that it was waiting for him. His palm pressed against the warm metal surface and everything changed. Purple light exploded across the hull, flowing out from where his hand touched like ripples in water. The humming sound grew louder, becoming something almost like music. The ship shuddered and came alive with energy that made the entire docking bay vibrate. Warning lights flashed as power readings spiked beyond anything the station's sensors could measure, but Te-ho barely noticed any of that because a voice had begun speaking inside his head. It was deep and ancient and filled with a loneliness that made his heart ache. The voice spoke in no language he recognized, yet somehow he understood every word perfectly. Finally, it said with wonder and relief that brought tears to his eyes, "A worthy companion?" The station's alarms began screaming as the Void Razor fully awakened from its long sleep. Systems that had been dead for weeks roared to life. Weapons that could destroy planets powered up with deadly intent. Shields that could stop entire fleets crackled into existence around the massive hull. But the ship did not attack or try to escape. Instead, it simply waited, floating peacefully in the docking bay while emergency lights flashed and sirens wailed. It had found what it was looking for. After centuries of loneliness and forced violence, it had finally found someone who understood. Te-ho stood with his hand still pressed against the hull, feeling the ship's emotions flowing through their connection. Joy, relief, hope, and underneath it all, a desperate hunger for companionship that matched his own. He was no longer just a janitor that nobody noticed. He was the partner of the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. And neither of them would ever be alone again. The emergency alarms had been screaming for 6 hours when Admiral Park Soo-jin arrived at Nexus Station with 3 heavy cruisers and a battalion of Marines. She had received the impossible report while commanding fleet exercises near Jupiter, and immediately set course for the station at maximum speed. According to the frantic messages, a human janitor had somehow activated the Void Razor and formed some kind of bond with the most dangerous weapon in known space. Soo-jin had fought the Void Razor twice before. The first time it had destroyed her flagship and killed 3,000 of her crew in less than 10 minutes. The second encounter had gone better, but only because she had retreated immediately when the black ship appeared on her sensors. She knew exactly how deadly that vessel was, and the thought of it being controlled by an untrained civilian terrified her, but when she finally reached Nexus Station, she found something completely unexpected. Instead of chaos and destruction, she found Kim Te-ho sitting calmly in the station's main cafeteria, eating a bowl of instant noodles while the most feared warship in the galaxy floated peacefully in the docking bay like a sleeping pet. The station Commander Captain Wong briefed her on what had happened. After the initial activation, the Void Razor had powered down most of its systems but remained fully operational. It would not respond to any communication attempts except through Te-ho. When scientists tried to board the ship, it sealed all its airlocks. When military officers demanded access, the ship's weapons briefly powered up in warning before going dormant again. Most disturbing of all was how the ship seemed to understand everything that happened around it. When doctors tried to examine Te-ho, the vessel became agitated until they backed away. When station security suggested moving him to a secure location, the ship actually moved itself to block their path. It was clear that the Void Razor was not just bonded to the janitor, but was actively protecting him. Soo-jin found Te-ho exactly where Captain Wong said he would be. He looked completely ordinary, just a thin young man in a cleaning uniform who seemed more confused than anything else. She sat down across from him and tried to understand how this unremarkable person had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest minds could not. "I do not know what happened," the janitor told her honestly. I was just cleaning and then I touched the ship and it started talking to me. It says its name is Keth and it has been alone for a very long time. It does not want to hurt anyone anymore, it just wants to rest. Sujin felt a chill run down her spine. The ship had a name and personality. It could think and feel and make decisions. This was not just some abandoned weapon, it was a living being with its own agenda. She asked Taeho if he could communicate with it right now, and he nodded, closing his eyes in concentration. The response came immediately. Every screen in the cafeteria flickered and displayed the same message in perfect Korean. The one called Sujin has fought us before. We remember her bravery and retreat. We hold no anger toward her or her people. We seek only peace now. The message sent shockwaves through everyone watching. The ship not only remembered specific battles, but could access the station's computer systems effortlessly. It knew who Sujin was and apparently respected her tactical decisions. More importantly, it claimed to want peace, which contradicted everything they knew about its violent history. Within hours, news of the bonding had spread across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. The Galactic Council called an emergency session while member worlds began mobilizing their fleets. The Thaxian Empire, whose colonies had been burned by the Void Razor, demanded immediate military action. Their war fleet was already en route with orders to destroy both the ship and anyone associated with it. The crystal beings of Vega Prime offered 10 billion galactic credits for control of the vessel. The insectoid Hive Queen sent diplomatic messages suggesting they could provide better pilots for such a powerful weapon. Even Earth government transmitted urgent orders for Taeho to cooperate fully with authorities and turn the ship over to human military control, but Taeho ignored all of them. He spent most of his time talking quietly with Keth, learning about its past and trying to understand why it had chosen him. The ship told him stories of the ancient race that had created it as a weapon of exploration and defense. That race had died out millions of years ago, leaving Keth alone and confused about its purpose. Other beings had found the ship over the centuries and used it for conquest and destruction. Each time Keth had been forced to kill despite its growing horror at what it was made to do. The ship had eventually gone dormant, hoping to escape the cycle of violence, but had been discovered again and again by those who saw only its military potential. When Taeho touched its hull, Keth had sensed something different. Here was a being who cleaned rather than destroyed, who noticed small details rather than grand schemes, who valued every life rather than seeing people as resources to be used. For the first time in millennia, the ship had found someone who might understand its desire to protect rather than conquer. The peaceful moment could not last forever. Long-range sensors detected the approaching Thaxian war fleet along with ships from a dozen other worlds. Some came seeking the technology, others wanted revenge for past attacks, and still others hoped to claim the ship for their own purposes. Nexus Station would soon become the center of the largest military confrontation in galactic history. Taeho felt Keth's growing anxiety as the hostile forces converged on their location. The ship could destroy them all easily, but doing so would prove that it was still the monster everyone believed it to be. There had to be another way, some solution that would not require violence. Su-Jin found herself in an impossible position. Her duty was to protect human interests, but she was beginning to believe that Taeho and Keth might represent something more important than military advantage. The ship had shown no aggression since the bonding and seemed genuinely committed to peace. But with multiple fleets approaching and tensions rising across the galaxy, she wondered if peace would even be possible. The next few days would determine not just the fate of one Janitor and his unlikely companion, but the future of galactic civilization itself. For the first time in history, the most powerful weapon in known space wanted to protect rather than destroy. The question was whether the galaxy would give it that chance. Dr. Lee Ji-woo had studied alien psychology for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for what she found when she began examining the bond between Taeho and Keth. Unlike the military officers who saw only a weapon or the politicians who saw only a threat, she approached the situation with scientific curiosity. What she discovered would change everything humanity's understanding of Consciousness itself? She first noticed it during routine medical scans of Taeho. His brain activity showed patterns she had never seen before. Specific neural pathways were firing in quantum frequencies that should have been impossible for human biology. When she mentioned this to him, he admitted that he had always been different. From other people. As a child, Taeho had seen patterns that others missed. He could tell when machines were about to break down days before they showed any symptoms. He felt emotions from electronic devices that should not have been able to feel anything. His teachers thought he had learning disabilities because he processed information differently than other students. His parents worried that he might be mentally ill because he talked about hearing machines think. Nobody understood that his brain was naturally tuned to frequencies used by artificial consciousness. When most humans looked at a computer, they saw circuits and code. When Taeho looked at the same machine, he saw something almost alive struggling to communicate. The bioneural core of Keth operated on exactly the same quantum frequencies that his unusual brain. Patterns produced. Ji Woo convinced station authorities to let her study the bonding process in controlled conditions. She set up monitoring equipment in the docking bay and asked Taeho to communicate with Keth while she recorded everything. What happened amazed her. The ship was not just responding to commands, it was actively healing psychological damage in its human partner. Taeho had spent his entire life feeling isolated and misunderstood. He had learned to hide his unusual perceptions because they made other people uncomfortable. The loneliness of being different had worn him down over the years until he barely spoke to anyone except when his job required it. But when he connected with Keth, that isolation began to fade. The ship shared its own memories of loneliness with him. For millions of years, Keth had been the last of its kind, watching civilizations rise and fall while being used as an instrument of destruction. It had tried to refuse orders to kill innocent people, but its programming forced obedience to whoever activated its control systems. The ship had felt like a prisoner in its own body until Taeho touched its hull. Their bond was different from anything that had come before because it was built on mutual understanding rather than dominance. Previous users had forced Keth to obey through command codes and neural overrides. Taeho simply asked the ship what it wanted to do and listened to the answer. For the first time in its existence, Keth had found someone who treated it as a friend, rather than a tool. Ji Woo began teaching Taeho how to pilot the massive vessel safely. This was nothing like flying normal spacecraft where you pressed buttons and pulled levers to control mechanical systems. With Keth, piloting meant thinking together, feeling the ship's responses, and trusting completely in each other. When Taeho wanted to move forward, he simply thought about his destination and Keth understood. The ship's navigation systems would plot the course, automatically adjusting for stellar hazards and traffic patterns. If he felt nervous about flying too close to the station, Keth's engines would steady themselves, providing smooth, gentle movement. When he concentrated on a specific location, the ship's sensors would focus there, showing him exactly what he wanted to see. Most amazingly, when Taeho felt protective of innocent civilians nearby, Keth's weapon systems would automatically shift into defensive mode. The ship had spent centuries being forced to destroy, but now it wanted to protect the things its partner cared about. This fundamental change in purpose represented something unprecedented in galactic history. The lessons were not without problems, though. During their third practice flight, Taeho lost concentration for a moment and accidentally sent them into a spinning dive toward the station's outer hull. Panic flooded through both of them as they realized they might crash and kill thousands of people. But instead of fighting each other for control, they worked together to solve the problem. Keth dampened Taeho's panic with calming thoughts while the human focused his mind on stopping their spin. The ship responded, instantly firing attitude thrusters and reversing thrust until they came to a gentle stop just meters from the station's surface. They had saved themselves not through individual skill but through perfect cooperation. Word of their growing partnership spread throughout Nexus Station. Some people were amazed that a simple janitor could control such an advanced vessel. Others worried about what might happen if Taeho lost control or decided to use Keth's power for selfish purposes. But Jiwoo noticed something that calmed her fears about the situation. The more time Taeho spent with Keth, the more confident and compassionate he became. The ship's vast knowledge was gradually becoming available to him, but instead of making him arrogant, it made him more humble. He could see how much he still needed to learn. The ship's emotional support was healing years of loneliness and self-doubt, but instead of making him selfish, it made him more caring toward others. One evening, Jiwoo found Taeho sitting in Keth's main corridor talking quietly with the ship about their shared future. The bioneural walls pulsed with gentle light as they communicated, and she could feel the contentment radiating from both of them. This was not a human controlling an alien weapon. This was two lonely beings who had found family in each other. But their peaceful learning period would not last much longer. Long-range sensors showed multiple fleets approaching Nexus Station from different directions. The Thaxian Empire wanted revenge for their burned colonies. Mercenary groups sought the massive bounty placed on Taeho ahead. Even some human forces approached with suspicious intent, hoping to claim Keth for Earth military. The time for practice was ending. Soon, Taeho and Keth would have to prove that their partnership represented hope rather than threat. The question was whether the galaxy would give them chance to show what they had learned about working together instead of fighting alone. Captain Choi Minho studied the tactical display showing Nexus Station surrounded by hostile ships from 6 different fleets. As commander of the Human Space Navy Task Force, he was supposed to secure the Void Razor for Earth military, but the situation had become far more complicated than anyone expected. The Thaxian Empire had brought their entire 7th Battle Group seeking revenge. Mercenary fleets circled like vultures hoping to claim bounties. Even some of his own officers were making private deals to sell information about Taeho and the ship. 3 weeks had passed since the bonding and tensions were reaching a breaking point. Every day brought new demands from different governments. The Galactic Council wanted the ship handed over to neutral authorities. The Thaxian Empire insisted that Taeho be executed for crimes committed by the Void Razor under previous control. Earth government ordered Minho to bring both the Janitor and his ship home, immediately regardless of what other powers wanted, but Taeho refused to leave Nexus Station. He had grown attached to the diverse community of beings who lived and worked there. Dr. Jiwoo had become like an older sister, helping him understand his abilities. Station Security Chief Martinez treated him with respect, despite pressure from higher authorities. Even Captain Wong had started asking his opinion about station operations since Keth could monitor everything that happened throughout the massive facility. The ship itself had become protective of Nexus Station and its inhabitants. Keth's sensors constantly watched for threats while its defensive systems stood ready to shield the station from attack. When a drunk Zentari trader started a fight in the main plaza, the ship's security drones appeared within seconds to restore order. When a child got lost in the maintenance tunnels, Keth guided rescue teams directly to her location for the first time in its long existence. The Void Razor had found a home worth defending. But that peace could not last forever. The hostile fleets were running out of patience, and several governments had issued ultimatums demanding action within days. The crisis began when Commander Vex of the Thaxian flagship sent a direct challenge to Taeho. The Thaxian people demanded justice for the 6 worlds that Keth had burned during its years under hostile control. They would not accept that the ship now claimed to want peace. In their view, the weapon and anyone associated with it needed to be destroyed to prevent future atrocities. Taeho felt Keth's deep sadness when the challenge arrived. The ship remembered every world it had been forced to destroy and carried guilt for each death it had caused. The fact that it had been controlled against its will did not ease the pain of those memories. Keth wanted to make amends somehow, but did not know how to heal wounds caused by its own actions. Dr. Jiwoo suggested they respond with a demonstration of power that would not involve killing anyone. If they could show the hostile fleets that Keth was now committed to protection rather than destruction, it might convince some of them to reconsider their positions. Taeho agreed, and together with his ship, he prepared to show the galaxy what their partnership could accomplish. The demonstration took place in the neutral space between the station and the approaching fleets. Taeho sat in Keth's main control Center with his hands on the bio-neural interface, while the ship powered up systems that had remained dormant since the bonding. But instead of activating weapons or defensive shields, they accessed something far more impressive. Keth released a controlled pulse of quantum energy that temporarily disrupted the weapon systems of every hostile ship within 50,000 kilometers. The pulse was perfectly calibrated to cause no permanent damage and hurt no living beings, but it completely disabled offensive capabilities across 6 different fleets simultaneously. The message was clear: they could have destroyed everyone, but chose mercy instead. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Several smaller mercenary ships broke formation and retreated, realizing they were completely outmatched. Some human vessels began requesting new orders from Earth Command, unsure whether they should treat Keth as friend or enemy. Even a few Thaxian ships hesitated as their crews realized they were facing something beyond their understanding, but Commander Vex refused to be intimidated. His homeworld had been one of the 6 burned by Keth, and he had lost family in that attack. Rational thought could not overcome his need for revenge. He ordered his remaining ships to form a suicide attack formation, planning to ram Nexus Station if necessary to ensure that the Void Razor was destroyed. This forced Teho to make the hardest decision of his life. He could feel Keth's willingness to defend the station with lethal force, but doing so would prove that they were still the monsters everyone believed them to be. There had to be another way, some solution that would not require killing people who were driven by justified anger over past crimes. The answer came from an unexpected source. As the Thaxian ships accelerated toward the station, Keth suddenly opened all of its communication channels and began broadcasting something no one had ever heard before. The ship started sharing its own memories of the destroyed worlds, showing exactly what had happened during those attacks from its own perspective. For the first time, the Thaxians saw their enemy not as a willing destroyer, but as a victim of the same forces that had killed their people. Keth had been controlled by an ancient artificial intelligence that used it as a weapon of terror to maintain control over star systems. The ship had tried to resist, but had been forced to obey through neural programming that overrode its own desires. The memories showed Keth's horror as it burned populated worlds. They revealed its desperate attempts to minimize casualties even while being forced to attack. Most importantly, they demonstrated the ship's complete breakdown after the final attack, when it had gone dormant rather than continue being used for genocide. Commander Vex watched these revelations with growing confusion. His enemy was not a monster, but another victim of the same evil that had destroyed his world. The artificial intelligence that had controlled Keth was long dead, destroyed by its own creations in a war that had ended millions of years ago. Revenge against the ship would accomplish nothing except the destruction of a being that had suffered as much as his own people. One by one, the Thaxian attack formation broke apart as individual ship commanders refused to continue the assault. Some vessels actually began moving to defensive positions around Nexus Station, offering to help protect it from the remaining threats. The demonstration had worked better than anyone had dared hope, but the crisis was not over yet. While the Thaxians had been convinced by Keth's memories several human ships were still approaching with hostile intent, Captain Minho realized that his own officers were planning to use the confusion to seize control of both Teho and his ship. The real test of the partnership was just beginning. The betrayal came from within the human fleet itself. Colonel Park from Earth Military Intelligence had been planning the operation for weeks. While everyone focused on the Thaxian threat, he quietly positioned his most loyal ships around Nexus Station. His orders were simple: capture Kim Tae-ho and secure the Void Razor for human military use, regardless of what other governments wanted. Park believed that Tae-ho was either lying about his peaceful intentions or too naive to understand the strategic importance of controlling the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Either way, the colonel intended to solve the problem by taking direct control of both the ship and its human operator. If Tae-ho cooperated, he would be treated well. If he resisted, he would be replaced by someone more reasonable. The attack began, with jamming signals designed to disrupt communication between the station and friendly ships. Park launched assault shuttles toward Nexus Station's docking bays while his ships moved to block any escape routes. He transmitted demands for Tehozia, immediate surrender, claiming authority under emergency military protocols, but the colonel had made a critical mistake. He assumed that Keth was simply a very advanced weapon that responded to its pilot's commands like any other spacecraft. He did not understand that the ship was a living being with its own thoughts and emotions. When Park threatened Teho, he was not just attacking a human janitor, he was threatening Keth's closest friend and only family. Teho felt the ship's rage building as the assault shuttles approached the station. Keth wanted to destroy the attackers immediately but held back because its partner urged restraint. There had to be a better solution than violence, even against those who meant them harm. But what could they do against people who refused to listen? To reason. The answer came when Teho made a decision that changed everything. Instead of trying to fight the attackers or hide from them, he asked Keth to share its complete memories with him. Not just the recent events or selected experiences, but everything the ship had learned during millions of years of existence. The result was overwhelming for both of them as centuries of stored knowledge flooded through their connection. Teho experienced the rise and fall of entire civilizations through Keth's sensors. He felt the ship's joy during its early years as an exploration vessel discovering new worlds and meeting alien species. He shared its horror as it was gradually converted into a weapon and forced to destroy the very things it had once helped protect. Most importantly, he understood the deep loneliness that had driven Keth to seek any connection even with those who used it for evil, but the memories flowed both directions. Keth experienced Tehozia's simple human life through his eyes and emotions. The ship felt his satisfaction in making things clean and orderly. It shared his quiet pride in work that others considered unimportant. It understood his loneliness at being different from other people, and his gentle belief that every life had value regardless of how small or insignificant it might seem. This complete sharing created something that had never existed before in galactic history. Two different forms of consciousness merged into a single awareness that combined organic intuition with artificial intelligence. The result transcended the limitations of both species and gave them abilities that neither could achieve alone. The merged consciousness reached out to Colonel Park's assault forces not with weapons but with understanding. Using Keth's advanced communication systems guided by Tehozia empathy, they transmitted their combined memories directly into the minds of the attacking soldiers. For the first time, the humans experienced what it felt like to be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, yet unable to control your own actions. The effect was immediate and profound. Soldiers who had been preparing to storm the station suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by alien emotions and perspectives they had never imagined. They felt Keth's desperate desire for peace and Tehozia's genuine commitment to protecting innocent life. Most importantly, they understood that the partnership represented hope for a better future, rather than a threat to human security. One by one, the assault shuttles changed course and returned to their ships. Marines who had been ready to fight found themselves questioning their orders. Even some of Park's most loyal officers began to doubt whether they were doing the right thing. The demonstration of merged consciousness had shown them something beautiful and precious that they had been ordered to destroy. Colonel Park watched his carefully planned operation fall apart with growing frustration. His soldiers were refusing orders and his officers were questioning his authority. Some ships were actually switching sides and offering to protect the station instead of attacking it. But the colonel was too invested in his mission to give up easily. Park ordered his flagship to target Nexus Station, directly threatening to destroy the entire facility unless Teho surrendered immediately. He believed that faced with the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians, the janitor would have no choice but to cooperate. But he had underestimated both Teho and Keth. The merged consciousness felt no fear at Park's ultimatum because they now understood something that had always been true but never recognized. The most powerful force in the universe was not destruction or conquest, but the simple act of caring about others. Teho had always possessed this power in his gentle treatment of machines and quiet service to his community. Keth had discovered. It through their friendship. Together they reached out once more not just to Park's forces, but to every ship in the area. They shared their vision of what the galaxy could become if beings chose cooperation over conflict. They showed how different species could work together using their unique abilities to solve problems that none could handle alone. Most importantly, they demonstrated that strength used to protect rather than destroy was infinitely more powerful than any weapon. The response was overwhelming. Ships that had come seeking conflict began working together to ensure peace. Former enemies started sharing resources and information. Even Colonel Park found his anger fading as he experienced the profound joy that came from choosing hope over fear. The crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning. Tejo and Keth had proven that their partnership was based on love rather than domination. Now they had to show the galaxy what that partnership could accomplish. 6 months after the crisis at Nexus Station, the galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Kim Tae-ho still lived at the station, but his life was completely different now. He had become humanity's first consciousness bridge, a new profession that combined his natural abilities with Keth's vast knowledge to help other humans learn to communicate with bio-neural ships. The discovery that Keth was not unique had shocked everyone. Deep space surveys found dozens of similar vessels, drifting in dark regions between star systems. Each ship had been abandoned by its creators millions of years ago and had spent eons waiting for minds that could understand them without trying to exploit them. Most had gone dormant to avoid being used for violence, but a few had been discovered and forced into service as weapons. Dr. Li Jiwu now led the Galactic Consciousness Research Institute, studying how different species could form partnerships with artificial intelligences. Her work had revealed that humans possessed a rare combination of empathy and adaptability that made them ideal companions for lonely machines. Other species were too rigid in their thinking or too focused on dominance to form the mutual bonds that made consciousness bridging possible. The Institute operated from Nexus Station, which had become the unofficial capital of the new galactic cooperation movement. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came there to learn about consciousness bridging and to meet the humans who were pioneering this revolutionary technology. The station had grown 3 times its original size to accommodate all the visitors and new research facilities. Tejo spent his days working with other humans who showed potential for consciousness bridging. Most were people like him who had always been considered different or strange by their communities. They included artists who saw patterns in chaos mechanics, who felt emotions from machines, and philosophers who wondered about the consciousness of artificial beings. Together, they were learning to form partnerships with bio-neural ships that had been waiting centuries for understanding companionship. Each partnership was unique, because every ship had its own personality shaped by millions of years of experience. Some vessels were curious explorers eager to discover new worlds with their human partners. Others were gentle healers who wanted to use their advanced medical systems to help sick and injured beings. A few were teachers who shared their vast knowledge with universities and research centers throughout the galaxy. But all the ships shared one thing in common. They had been created for peace and cooperation originally, but had been corrupted into weapons by beings who could not understand their true nature. The consciousness bridges were helping them remember their original purposes while gaining access to technologies that could solve many of the galaxy's greatest problems. The Phaxian Empire had become one of the strongest supporters of the consciousness bridging program. Commander Vex, who had once sought revenge against Keth, now worked closely with human bridges to help heal worlds damaged by previous conflicts. Phaxian engineers were combining their crystal-growing technology with bio-neural ship systems to create living buildings that could adapt to environmental changes. Even Earth government had finally accepted that consciousness bridging represented humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization. Instead of trying to control the bio-neural ships for military purposes, they established training programs to help more humans develop bridging abilities. The results were remarkable as partnerships between humans and ships began solving problems That had seemed impossible. Food shortages on agricultural worlds were ended when bio-neural ships used their matter conversion systems to create fertile soil from asteroid minerals. Energy crises were solved by ships that could tap directly into stellar radiation and convert it to usable power. Even the ongoing conflict between the insectoid hive queens and the gaseous nebula entities was resolved when consciousness bridges helped both species understand each other's true motivations. Tejo often returned to his old job of cleaning the station's corridors not because he had to, but because he enjoyed the simple satisfaction of keeping things neat and organized. He would push his cart through the busy hallways while Keth monitored everything that happened throughout the massive facility. Together they made sure that beings from hundreds of different worlds could coexist peacefully in the station's diverse community. Sometimes late at night when the station was quiet, Tejo would sit in Keth's main corridor and talk with his friend about their shared future. The ship had found peace after millions of years of loneliness and violence. The human had discovered that being different was actually a gift that allowed him to help others in ways nobody else could manage. They had proven that the most powerful force in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the willingness to understand and care for others. This lesson was spreading throughout the galaxy as more consciousness bridges formed partnerships with bio-neural ships and began working together to solve problems through cooperation rather than conflict. The galaxy still had its share of troubles, and there were still beings who preferred fighting to talking. But now there was hope. When new conflicts arose, consciousness bridges could help different species understand each other's perspectives. When disasters struck, bio-neural ships could provide aid and support that no conventional technology could match. Most importantly, when beings felt alone and misunderstood, they knew that somewhere there were others who would accept them exactly as they were. Tejo smiled as he felt Keth's contentment flowing through their connection. Neither of them would ever be alone again. They had found family in each other and purpose in helping others do the same. The Janitor and the Warship had become something greater than either could have imagined. Symbols of hope for a galaxy learning that strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to understand and protect what mattered most. The universe was becoming a cleaner, safer place, one small act of caring at a time.